Hello, everyone, and welcome to the discussion. We're here to mark Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which promotes digital accessibility and inclusion for people with all disabilities. We're chatting to three EPP Group MEPs about their own personal experiences and disability in the context of COVID-19. I'm Kevin Purcell, and here with me here now are Swedish MEP David Lega, Hungarian MEP Ádám Kósa with interpreter Christina Horvat, and the Greek MEP Stelios Kimpouropoulos. Thank you all very much for taking the time to be with us here today. It's much appreciated. We'll get stuck in, and first of all, I would like to know how this pandemic has maybe affected you personally. Maybe we'll start with David. I know Sweden has taken a slightly different approach to the rest of Europe.
Yes, and thank you for hosting this interview as well, because I think it's really important that we get out there and talk and meet people as well. Well, it's been strange, naturally, that we are working from home, not staying in Brussels anymore, but the impact for me has been a lot less compared to those who actually have been affected health-wise or economically by the pandemic. We found good ways to work from home, so I'm really happy about that. But naturally, it's different, but it's easy to adjust compared to those suffering.
And Ádám, how has it been for you? Have you had to make any changes with working at home?
I experienced it as a positive thing, to be honest. And thank you for hosting this, first of all, because we have less traveling. I think I had more time with the family, so I had more time to spend with my kids, with my wife. And I think for that aspect, it was a positive change. But I think the quality should be maybe better in some questions or in some aspects. But I'll wait for your questions.
Okay, and Stelios, how has the last few months been for you?
Thank you very much for the hosting this event. It's a good way to express how was the life when there was a great lockdown, especially in Greece. We live during a very severe lockdown because Kyriakos Mitsotakis took very strict measures, and the good result was that we have very few deaths during lockdown. At this moment, we have just 165 deaths. So it is different for European Parliament, for the working. We still work with teleworking, and it's a new way how we can face a new reality.
And that's an important point, really, that it's sort of opened our eyes to the fact that remote working can actually work without too many problems. Would you agree with that, David?
Yes, it works a lot better than I think many of us expected. On the other hand, you also miss the unofficial meetings in the corridor, the talks where you actually accidentally bump into each other or other MEPs from other countries. And the thing that's hardest, I think, is to in a discussion or a decision-making event, it's hard to read the room because you only see the speaker. You can't see everyone else at the same time. So, but as I said before, these are very small problems compared to the ones suffering. So we have to adjust to it.
And Ádám, the European Parliament was quick to roll out remote voting. That's something that's really welcomed.
Yes. I don't think that remote working is the most efficient way of working in this case. The physical meetings with persons, as it was already mentioned, I think it's really important, and I think it's more effective, but it is also important in remote working that what is the attitude of the members who actually use this, and how effective it is. It depends on this attitude as well. So there are a couple of participants who have technical problems. They don't have the right equipment, for instance. But I think with persons with disabilities, this is the future, remote working. So I think in this regard, it was good.
Would you agree, Stelios, with those comments?
I agree that we needed to find new ways how to work. But I'm something that I have an opinion between David and Ádám, that it's not easy to work from far away, from a teleworking, from a remote way, but it was necessary. And it's not only
Okay, Stelios, your mic has cut out there. We'll come back to you in a moment, but I want to talk about social distancing as a result of the pandemic. And I suppose there are both positives and negatives to this, it seems. I know from experience in my journalism career, campaigners have often called for more space for wheelchair users in streets, in shops. It might be a little bit strange that that's now happening because more people need more space. Is that welcome, David, that the streets are being opened up, the shops are being opened up to create that more space?
Well, even in a crisis and in a horrible situation, there are some advantages that we can see, and that is one really important advantage. But on the overall, it's an unprecedented and difficult situation. I mean, we have failed to recognize the profound impact of social distancing with people who are blind or vision impaired. That makes it a lot harder for them. So in total, I think I would prefer going back to the way it was before, because if I'm going to a shop, I naturally need to have the possibility to come in, but I also need to respect the shopkeeper's right to have items in the store and sell. So we have to find a way to balance these rights and not put one right above the other ones. So it's always a balance, isn't it, when it comes to rights like this?
Yeah, and especially when it comes to maybe the plans in place for social distancing. And you mentioned it could cause problems like signage, hygiene practices, the queues. Ádám, what do you think in relation to that?
I think that, as David already mentioned, when a pandemic can have negative effects and also positive effects. And for the deaf persons, especially in this situation, it's really difficult keeping the social distance, because if it's a loud, noisy area, there are some trains, buses, etc. When you can sign remotely, so the communication usually works. So we don't have to listen to things because we communicate in a visual way. However, the masks pose a problem for us, because we cannot lip read other people. And when it's obligatory to wear the masks in every institutions, communication becomes very difficult for us. And we always have to put down the mask for a second and explain that we are deaf, etc. But I think we can learn a lot from that going into the future.
And Stelios, do you think all of this is being taken into account when plans are being put in place for social distancing in the likes of shops and on streets?
I think that we need to find ways to be acceptable for everyone. We need to find solutions, and yes, it's reality that we need to learn to live with the new reality. We need to learn not to affect so much the distance, not so much the people and the connection, because if we still live with this way in the future, I'm afraid that other problems will be created because we are human beings and we need the touch, we need to be in a society sharing with each other our lives.
And another potential problem that's come up, I think in the Netherlands, there's some anecdotal evidence when it comes to public transport, and often staff are there to assist wheelchair users in particular getting on and off trains and buses. There are some suggestions that they might be afraid to be in close contact with other persons. That poses problems as well, David.
Yes, of course, but I mean, this affects us all in different ways. The real concern for me, the real worry, is that we have seen in some countries where people with disabilities are still living in institutions. And when the pandemic have gotten a hold and COVID-19 virus have gotten into these institutions, the healthcare workers there, the caregivers have gotten medical help, but the people living there with disabilities have gotten none. These are acute emergencies that we need to address, compared to that it's a bit harder for me to get on a bus. I mean, that's a problem too, but we need to address the real emergencies first. And that is, in some countries where you have had triage, where you have refused people with disabilities healthcare because you have thought that they have a smaller chance of surviving the COVID-19 virus, even if the disability had nothing to do with the virus. These are real emergencies that we need to address, and I really believe that we need to address those first, because hopefully the other ones will, as I said, it affects all of us in different ways, but when it comes to real health issues and dangers of not being able to survive the pandemic due to your disability, that is where we need to start, and we need to start now.
And we've seen across Europe there's a particular problem. Sorry, Ádám.
I think in many countries there are some emergency solutions and some suggestions how they should solve these problems. I think it depends on how conscious they are about these problems and issues. They have to be raised. And I fully agree with David in this regard. So first we have to solve these problems because these are really important. And in the petition committee, they already mentioned this problem that that they should give in petitions and strengthen their views that this need to be solved. And I know a positive example in my area. Now sign language is quite visible due to the deaf members of the parliament, because they lobbied for all those media events where they give information about the pandemic, and they have sign language interpretation. And the result of that was that people started accepting sign language, deaf persons, and sign language as a mother tongue.
Let's talk a little bit about Global Accessibility Awareness Day, focusing, of course, on digital access and inclusion for people with disabilities and impairments. I want to know what more can be done at EU level to increase digital accessibility. Stelios, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I want to make a comment for the question before, that we need to follow, to continue to have our priorities during, after the COVID-19. We need to still press for the rights of people with disability, and we need to continue the digitalization. We need to continue the accessibility everywhere. So don't be afraid of the distance, the social distance, and we need to continue to fight for our rights. As concerns the digital period, we need to educate more and more people with or without disability to understand and to be more familiarized with the idea of using the digital to be able
Okay, your microphone has just cut off there, Stelios, again. David, I mean, we're hearing there might be a digital revolution after all of this. How important is it that this digital revolution focuses as well on disabilities in terms of video conferencing tools and websites and making them more accessible?
Well, the revolution is here. It's all around us every day. And I believe that will continue regardless of what we as politicians do, as long as we don't obstruct it. And that is really important for us, I think, with different kinds of disabilities, that we don't obstruct the innovation of companies with regulation as well. Look at the, I mean, I know that we have different opinions in some ways regarding this, but look at the charging standards for cell phones, for example, where I'm a bit worried that when we as politicians define that everyone should use the same kind of charger, for example, that limits regulation, and that limits innovation. And induction charging, for example, would never have been invented if we had a common charger. And me with paralyzed arms, I cannot plug in a regular charger into my phone, but I can place it with my mouth, like on an induction charger, which means that we also have a responsibility to see that we don't limit the innovation that companies have. I use all the regular, like Google Home or Amazon Echo and all these innovations every day to ease in my life. So it's in here, and we're already using it. We just need to stay out of the way.
Stelios, just to go back to you, because I know you were in the middle of a point there, if you want to continue that, and your thoughts on the digital revolution.
Yes, we need to give the opportunities for everyone to get more familiar, to be more familiar with digital area. And we need to understand that for the future, not to make the same mistakes, and to create a digital area, a digital period for all, to be acceptable, to be accessible for all. So this is the point for our policy making in the European Parliament.
And Ádám, what are your thoughts on this idea that a digital revolution is happening, and that it should, of course, consider persons with disability?
I firmly believe that a lot of things depend on how open the society is and how inclusive. And I think the technology is already there. There is proof, as David has already said. And I think they quite have built in the basics of that for the future innovations. Accessible web pages are here already. They're not a principle only, and accessibility is a great principle. So I think many things depend on the attitude of people, and if they are open, if we can change this attitude to something positive, then we can change many things, and people can be more accepting of change, of otherness. And I firmly believe that it would bring good solutions in the future. So I think that technology and development is very important, and innovation should not be withheld by regulation, as it was already mentioned. So when we are developing, we have to first think of accessibility as well. So it should be accessible to all from the beginning to the end. We always have to take into consideration those points.
And particularly important in the workplace as well. I'm curious to know what it's like in the European Parliament, and are there enough resources for you to be able to work properly, David?
Yes, for me it has been working excellent, and I got a lot of support to be able to work and fulfill my mission as an MEP as well. So I'm extremely happy with the help that I've been getting. But I think also that it's important that, because this is sort of where it connects, isn't it? When people with disabilities take normal positions in society, regardless if it is working in a bank or sitting in the European Parliament, that's when the education comes to society. And that is how we avoid the different effects that we see now in pandemic crisis, for example. So when we talk about, or when people talk about educating the environment and people around us, it's because we need to avoid that very dangerous things happen when there's a crisis.
And Stelios, you're happy with the working environment in the European Parliament?
Yes, absolutely. I'm very fine, and I feel very lucky that I work in this place and in this European Parliament, because from the very beginning, the European Parliament staff helped me to create a system which supports my needs. So I have something that is very, very important for me, personal assistants. So people who support my needs, my work, and my way of acting. But we need to say here that this system of personal assistant is very, very important for everyone, for everyone who needs this service, and for all European disabled citizens. So we need to create legislation for everyone, for all European member states.
Ádám, what do you think? More work to be done at an EU level?
I'm sure that I'm not alone when I say that in the beginning it was quite difficult, not only for me, but for all MEPs here. The opportunities, the technology, I think the first 1 or 2 weeks were the most difficult, but I think a lot of things got better in the last 2 months. And I think the quality of the services were also getting quite good, but it's not 100% efficient, I think, working like this. But for instance, for me, when I need sign language interpretation, we use a different program, so we need to work a little on that as well. But I think from the part of the Parliament, they gave me maximal support, but I think time is needed. As I mentioned before, in the long run, I think this remote working will be the future. And I think that my colleagues, when I see my colleagues, has already mentioned this, that we have to deal with, we have to do our work in order to make this world accessible. I always think positively, and I always see that in the long run how it would work and how it would be efficient. And I think it would bring positive results in the end.
And how important is it that events like this highlight these issues, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, that we can talk about all these issues and highlight them more? David?
I think, as I said before, that if we educate now, it will be easier to understand why this is important when something happens, like the pandemic. But also to show that due to the support that I get from society, from Europe and in Sweden, depending on what it's about, I can be more than my disability. My identity can be something else than that I'm in a wheelchair. Due to the support that I can get in Europe, I can become an MEP with a disability instead of being a disabled person who happens to be an MEP. And that's what it's about for me.
Stelios, would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with David, because when we say the phrase with disability, it means that I'm a human being that which for him the disability is created by society, not because I make use of a wheelchair or make use of sign language, but because society doesn't understand how this human being works. That it's not different, but it is his or her way of living and of acting. So we need to create not only this day, but a system, a medicated system, that make new people, new human beings, able to ready to understand that in this society, everybody is accepted.
And perhaps the last word to Ádám, first and foremost, I suppose you're all MEPs working for everybody.
Yes, as you said. Yes, in 2009, I got elected as a member of the European Parliament. And in the campaign, the motto was that I'm not only working for persons with disabilities, but for all people, so that we can have a better quality of life, and we can make that accessible for all people as member of the European Parliament. If people get accessibility, then everything is great. So I cannot highlight it enough. We're not only working for people with disabilities, but for all people, from the babies to the grandmothers and grandfathers, etc. So I could list a million examples. I think it goes beyond, labels. We're working for people. One thing I would like to add as well, that in the European Parliament, I worked a lot with artificial intelligence and technology and how it works in the future. And we can see the results in technology, And in some cases, there were some cases where persons with disabilities could bring like better results due to these artificial technologies. So when I would be physically in the parliament, yes, I can meet with people, we can shake hands, etc. But on the other hand, when it's remote working, I can sit in 2 meetings at the same time. So there were some cases when I did that, and I was following both of those meetings. So, and due to the technology, I could do that. So, it's a kind of funny, but I think this is the future.
Okay, very good. We leave it there. Listen, thanks so much, David, Ádám, Stelios, and Christina for being with us here today. And thanks everybody for watching. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.